Leaders who had stayed neutral began quietly reaching out to Traoré's team. African nations rallied behind him. Young leaders in Latin America and Southeast Asia called him a symbol of fearless diplomacy. Chapter 10. The UN responds. In an emergency UN briefing the next day, tensions were high. Trump's team accused Traoré of inciting disrespect. But an unexpected figure, Canada's ambassador, spoke up. Perhaps what we witnessed wasn't disrespect. Perhaps it was accountability. Chapter 11. Trump doubles down. Refusing to back off, Trump scheduled a solo broadcast. I don't apologize for being rich, successful, and right. I'm not here to please internet mobs. But the ratings tanked. People weren't interested in ego. They were interested in courage. Chapter 12. Traoré's masterstroke. In a surprise move, Traoré released a 5-minute speech titled Dignity Beyond Borders. Without naming Trump, he spoke of the importance of global respect, historical awareness, and shared progress. His delivery was calm, poised, and lethal in implication. Chapter 13. Power shifts. After Traoré's speech, several countries began to re-evaluate their alliances. The European public started questioning long-standing narratives. A petition was launched demanding a new code of conduct for global summits. Within days, over 1 million signatures were gathered. Chapter 14. The White House meltdown. Inside the White House, Trump convened a crisis meeting. Advisors threw ideas, discredit Traoré's background, start a new initiative, change the media narrative. But none of it worked. The tide had shifted. One strategist finally said, "We are not in control of the story anymore. He is." Chapter 15. Traoré's Rising League. In the weeks that followed, a coalition of young, reformist leaders from Africa, Asia, and Latin America began forming what the media dubbed the Traoré League. Their first resolution? A demand for fairer IMF policies and a re-evaluation of how development aid is distributed. Their voice was unified, modern, and magnetic. Chapter 16. The Empire's Rebuttal. News of Traoré's successful coalition spread like wildfire. Headlines across Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia began to shift their tone. No longer was the narrative about a rogue African leader challenging global order. It was about a visionary creating a new path forward. Donald Trump, watching from his estate in Florida, was incensed. His usual confidence wavered as he paced the ornate halls of Mar-a-Lago. The coalition's formation was not just a diplomatic move. It was a challenge to the very foundation of his global influence. Something had to be done. Within 48 hours, Trump summoned his closest political allies and media. Strategists for an emergency summit in Washington, D.C. present were key figures from his administration, influential business tycoons, media moguls, and intelligence operatives. The agenda was clear: dismantle Traoré's credibility and fracture the alliance he'd built. The response was swift. A barrage of media reports emerged questioning Traoré's legitimacy, his past affiliations, and even his mental stability. Fabricated intelligence documents were leaked to friendly outlets, portraying him as a radical with dangerous ambitions. Trump himself went live on international broadcast, declaring, "The world cannot be held hostage by an untested experiment. What Traoré represents is chaos disguised as reform." But unlike past opponents who crumbled under such pressure, Traoré didn't falter. His team was prepared. They countered with documentary evidence, video testimonies from allies, and an unprecedented global livestream where Traoré calmly dismantled each accusation. "The truth," he said, "needs no performance, only clarity." That simple sentence echoed across news platforms, trending within minutes. Hashtags like #TruthNeedsClarity and #TraResponse flooded social media. But Trump wasn't done. Behind closed doors, he activated a network of covert operatives to infiltrate and destabilize Traoré's coalition. From cyberattacks on African digital infrastructure to whispered bribes among minor political players, the war had shifted into the shadows. And Traoré, he wasn't blind to it. Surveillance data, intercepted communications, and whistleblower intel began pouring into his war room. "The empire fights in darkness," he told his chief advisor, "but will answer with light." What followed next was a bold move no one expected: an international tribunal, streamed live to the world, where Traoré challenged Trump's accusations point by point with undeniable proof, turning the tables in a way that left the old guard speechless. The battle was no longer about two men. It was a global referendum on truth, power, and the future. Chapter 17: Shadows and Strategy. As Traoré's coalition gained momentum, Donald Trump convened a confidential meeting with a select group of global elites at an undisclosed location. Former heads of state, energy magnates, and influential media moguls gathered in a room, dimly lit by a chandelier that hung like a relic of forgotten empires. Trump paced slowly, his face unusually solemn. "We are not just losing influence," he began. "We are losing the narrative." A British tycoon leaned forward. "You mean to tell us a young African leader is reshaping the world order with diplomacy and resolve alone?" Trump nodded. "And worse, he's winning hearts. Even some of our own networks are broadcasting his speeches uninterrupted." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, an oil baron from Texas spoke. "So what's the play, Donald?" Trump smirked. "We disrupt from within. Discredit. Divide. Delay." The plan was clear. Infiltrate the Traoré-led coalition, using think tanks and NGOs with covert agendas. Fabricate internal tensions. Leak falsified reports of corruption. Feed the media half-truths that could trigger mistrust. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré's intelligence network intercepted fragments of encrypted communications hinting at the plan. Instead of reacting rashly, Traoré doubled down on transparency. Every policy meeting was live-streamed. Financial records of foreign aid were published in real time. The people, not just in Burkina Faso, but across Africa and Asia, were watching and appreciating the candor. Meanwhile, Trump's operatives began infiltrating key cities. In Accra, Johannesburg, and Nairobi, suspicious NGOs with glossy brochures and ambiguous missions began staging protests that seemed too well-funded, too coordinated. Yet local communities, empowered by Traoré's decentralization policies, began exposing inconsistencies. One viral moment shifted the tide. A leaked audio recording of a Trump advisor stating, "If we can't buy them, we break them." The clip was broadcast across multiple platforms. It sparked global outrage. Traoré stood before the United Nations again, this time not with a speech, but with evidence, dossiers, transcripts, funding trails. The room, packed with delegates and media alike, fell into stunned silence as truth eclipsed power. "I do not seek revenge," Traoré said. "I seek renewal. This world deserves better than shadows and suits." For the first time in a long while, the applause wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Chapter 18: The Turning Point. The world was no longer watching passively, following the global reverberations of Traoré's diplomatic breakthroughs and Trump's increasingly erratic counter-moves. The stage was set for a pivotal shift. In a bold move, President Ibrahim Traoré invited several world leaders, including allies of the United States, to Ouagadougou for a summit on global equity and technological sovereignty. To the shock of many, key NATO members sent envoys. France, Germany, Turkey, and even Canada dispatched senior diplomats, intrigued by Traoré's proposals on decolonized tech and fair economic partnerships. The summit was unprecedented. Held in a solar-powered, dome-shaped convention hall, built in just 6 months by a joint Burkina Faso, South Korea project. The venue itself was a symbol of what Traoré stood for: innovation, independence, and cooperation. During the opening address, Traoré didn't name Trump directly, but the message was clear. True strength lies not in how loudly you speak, but in how many voices willingly echo yours. He outlined a 10-point plan for global digital fairness, data sovereignty, shared research funding, AI education access, and dismantling monopolies held by a handful of Western firms. Meanwhile, Trump, feeling increasingly cornered, held his own press conference from Mar-a-Lago. In it, he mocked the summit, calling it a gathering of irrelevant bureaucrats and fake visionaries. He claimed that Traoré was being used by hidden forces and accused the participating countries of betraying American interests. But the damage was done. In response, a viral video showed the German envoy at the Ouagadougou summit replying curtly, "Perhaps the world has outgrown shouting matches." International news agencies began referring to the shift as the Ouagadougou Doctrine, a framework that would define future diplomacy without traditional power blocks. Even within the United States, a growing number of young politicians, academics, and entrepreneurs began praising Traoré's vision. The phrase Traoré effect started trending on American college campuses. For the first time in decades, the US found itself not at the helm, but trying to catch up. The tide had truly turned. Trump's allies became restless. Some distanced themselves. Others urged him to evolve his message. But Trump remained defiant, launching a series of speeches branded as the Real American Revival Tour. However, the final blow came from an unexpected place. A leaked email thread from inside the US Department of State revealed that even American diplomats were exploring ways to engage with the Ouagadougou framework, quietly, cautiously, but undeniably. President Traoré had not just won a debate. He was redrawing the map of global power. Chapter 19. Foundations of a New Order. With the success of the Ouagadougou summit and the emergence of the so-called Traoré Doctrine, a new era of diplomacy and international cooperation began to take shape. Countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America started forming alliances based not on historical dominance, but on mutual respect, shared goals, and equitable partnerships. President Ibrahim Traoré became the figurehead of this movement, not just a leader of Burkina Faso, but a global symbol for change. His team worked tirelessly to draft a set of international agreements that would emphasize technology sharing, economic justice, climate resilience, and cultural exchange. The Global Equity Pact was signed by over 60 countries within the first year, setting new standards for transparency, sustainability, and local empowerment. It included measures to break the monopolies of giant tech corporations, support grassroots innovation, and ensure fair trade practices. Meanwhile, the United States found itself in a complicated position. While some factions embraced the new order, recognizing the inevitability of change, others resisted fiercely, seeking to preserve old power structures. Donald Trump's political influence, once dominant, waned steadily. His calls for isolationism and protectionism fell on deaf ears as the global narrative shifted toward collaboration and inclusion. At a special session of the United Nations, Traoré addressed the assembly with a message that resonated worldwide. Our strength does not come from exclusion or dominance, but from the courage to build together, to listen deeply, and to respect the dignity of every nation and every person. Chapter 20. Resistance and Resilience. Not everyone welcomed this emerging global paradigm. Established powers that had long benefited from the old order began to push back. Lobbyists intensified campaigns to undermine the Global Equity Pact. Disinformation campaigns spread doubts about the new alliances. Economies reliant on traditional trade patterns experienced turbulence. In Washington, shadowy meetings took place, discussing strategies to reassert influence. Yet, these efforts increasingly seemed outdated and outmatched by the momentum of change. In contrast, Traoré's leadership shone through adversity. He traveled extensively, personally engaging with leaders from small island nations threatened by climate change, indigenous communities fighting for rights, and young innovators driving social impact. His message was consistent. The future belongs to those who dare to unite, not to those who cling to division. This authenticity garnered international admiration and grassroots support. Chapter 21. The Youth Revolution. Across the globe, young people energized by Traoré's vision began mobilizing. Digital platforms buzzed with calls for change inspired by his speeches and policies. Student movements, tech startups, and civil society organizations formed a global network committed to social justice, environmental sustainability, and equitable technology access. Universities added courses analyzing Traoré's diplomacy as a case study in leadership and conflict resolution. The Traoré effect wasn't just political, it was cultural. Chapter 22. The Turning Tide in America. Even within the United States, cracks appeared in the old guard. Progressive politicians cited the Ouagadougou Doctrine as a blueprint for renewal. Public opinion polls showed growing support for international cooperation. A new generation of leaders emerged, calling for constructive engagement with the global equity, pact rather than confrontation. Trump's influence faded further as his message failed to resonate in this shifting landscape. Chapter 23: The New Global Summit. 2 years after the original confrontation, a new global summit convened, not in Geneva, but in Ouagadougou, symbolizing a tectonic shift in world leadership. This summit included leaders from all continents, with Traoré chairing the sessions. The agenda was bold: digital sovereignty, climate action, equitable trade, and global peace initiatives. The world watched, realizing that the balance of power had fundamentally changed. Chapter 24: Building Bridges. At the Ouagadougou summit, Traoré emphasized the importance of dialogue and partnership over confrontation. He hosted bilateral meetings with leaders who had previously been skeptical of his movement. One by one, old rivals found common ground on issues such as renewable energy, pandemic preparedness, and digital infrastructure. The atmosphere was markedly different from the tension-filled summit in Geneva years before. Here, respect and cooperation guided discussions. Traoré's diplomatic skill was on full display as he navigated complex negotiations, balancing diverse interests with patience and resolve. Chapter 25: A Personal Moment. Behind the scenes, Traoré reflected on the journey that brought him here. From the early days of being underestimated to standing at the helm of a global movement, he remained grounded in his roots. In a quiet moment, he called his family in Burkina Faso. His mother's voice was warm and proud. She reminded him that true leadership is service, not power. This reminder fueled his commitment to using influence wisely for the betterment of all. Chapter 26: The Global Network continued. The Traoré League expanded beyond governments. NGOs, tech innovators, youth organizations, and cultural institutions formed a vibrant international network. Collaborative projects flourished: solar microgrids in rural Africa, AI education hubs in Southeast Asia, and climate resilience initiatives in the Pacific Islands. This grassroots global synergy created a resilient web of cooperation that transcended traditional borders, empowering communities and fostering sustainable development worldwide. Chapter 27: The Final Confrontation. Though diminished, Trump made one last attempt to reclaim his standing. He planned a public debate aimed at challenging Traoré's policies and leadership. The event, held in New York City, attracted worldwide attention. But Traoré's calm, articulate responses and unwavering confidence outshined Trump's bombast and aggression. The debate further solidified Traoré's status as a visionary leader of a new world, inspiring millions and signaling an undeniable shift in global leadership. Chapter 28: A Legacy Secured. As the sun set in the decade, the world reflected on a transformational era. The clash that began as a moment of personal confrontation had sparked a global awakening. President Ibrahim Traoré's legacy was more than political. It was a testament to the power of dignity, clarity, and courage. The world had changed forever. Chapter 29: The New Dawn. With global systems increasingly embracing Traoré's vision, a sense of optimism filled the air. Economic indicators showed improvement in previously marginalized regions. Educational access expanded. Environmental policies gained traction. Traoré's leadership was cited as a catalyst, inspiring other leaders to prioritize inclusion and sustainability. Chapter 30: Reflections and Future Paths. In a reflective interview, Traoré shared his thoughts on the journey. He spoke about the challenges, the doubts, and the unexpected victories. Change is never easy, but when truth meets courage, it becomes unstoppable. Our world still faces many challenges, but I believe in the power of unity to overcome them. His words resonated globally, leaving an enduring message for generations to come. Epilogue: The moment that changed everything. Years later, historians and analysts would point to that live summit debate when a rising African leader dismantled the bravado of a former US president as a defining moment. It was more than a clash of egos. It was a turning point in global consciousness, an awakening to a new order built on respect, equity, and shared humanity.